This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design. Welcome to the JB Podcast. I am Joe Abbas Bangoa. We have two kinds of people in life. People who, the first set of people are people who believe their lives are shaped by circumstances, the circumstances around them. And so they blame everything for what is happening around them. They don't take responsibility for anything. They think they are just pawns in the games of life. But there are another set of people, and possibly maybe we have a majority of those. But then we have another set of people who believe they have a God-given agency to shape and co-create, not just their lives, but the lives of their community, and possibly even the lives of their nations. This program is dedicated to searching out, looking out for those people who are of the latter bit, tell their story, and maybe inspire more people to believe that you can shape not just your life, but you can shape nations. This is the JB Podcast. This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design.
Even when we are speaking, we choose to speak a language that most of our people don't even understand. Even when we are supposed to be speaking to the whole country.
Chernor Bah. For UNICEF, the World Bank, the Population Council, the Nike Foundation, and the European Union. He has served on United Nations high-level panels on global education and youth, peace and security, and was an expert advisor to the UN Security Council. His advocacy for girls' education has led him to closely work with Malala Yousafzai and Michelle Obama. In 2013, he introduced Malala, the UN's Malala Day Youth Assembly, an event that gathered young leaders from over 80 countries. He also contributed to Michelle Obama's Let Girls Learn initiative, advising on strategies to remove barriers to education. In July 2023, as minister, Bah reunited with Malala at the Women Deliver 2023 conference, reinforcing the shared commitment to civic engagement and global education advocacy. Holding a master's degree from the University of Notre Dame's Kroc Institute, Bah continues to be a champion for education, gender equality, and youth empowerment, driving lasting change on a global scale.
Chernor Bah. Somebody said Alaji Chernor Bah. That's not Alaji there. But this is Chernor Bah, popularly called Cee Bah. How did you get to be called Cee Bah?
Cee Bah is actually, my name is Chernor Bah, but when I went to school, they registered me as Bah. But you know, back then you have Bah 1, Bah 2. We're about to take NPSC, and the teacher said they're going to assign me Bah 1 or Bah 2, and I didn't like it. So at home I was being called Chernor. So Chernor, which is actually my first name, became my middle name. It became Cee Bah. And when I went to the Albert Academy in JSS 1, my name was number 1 on the register. So the teacher would just come and say, Bah C for the first day. The next day, he would just say Cee Bah. The next day, he just say Cee Bah. And so everybody at the Albert Academy just knew me as Cee Bah. That's how it was. It was one of those things. The teacher gave me the name, and I love it.
So let's roll the tape.
Yes.
Let's roll the tape. Go back. You said you were born in Kanike.
Yes.
Go back to those early days. Go back to those early days. Tell us what family.
Well, I have been a very blessed man, and I have been, I come from what the Americans will call the University of Hard Knock Life. I was born in the slum community of Kanike.
That's where your parents grew up?
No, my parents are both from outside of Freetown. My father is from Bond.
How did you end up in Kanike?
My mom and dad were just there. I guess that's kind of where they were stuck. My birth was pretty inauspicious. My mom was getting ready to go to cottage, and she entered into this pan body washyard to wash, to bathe herself, to go to the hospital. Inside that pan body washyard, I was born, right there, next to a pit toilet. Right there, my mom started, apparently she went into labor, and there was a lady next door who was an old nurse, and she was called upon, and the neighbor was like, hey, the body. So I like to tell that story because for me, that's the beginning that's how I came into this world. I like to think about it as I came, I was ready to come. I was like, irrespective of where I was born, I'm gonna come. And I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna make and tell and write.
And it wasn't a bad omen as far as you're concerned.
I thought actually it was a fantastic model. I think omen. I think because if you think about a lot of great people, a lot of people who have passion and dreams, it starts from a small beginning. Most of the scriptures that we look at say, "Do not despise small beginning," and my beginning was particularly small and inauspicious. Palm body, bathroom, washyard, pit toilet. Everything you think of as not cool as a start, for me that's why I started. And therefore, I knew the only path was up. Because when I look at that, that's why I say to folks, you know, this office and the trappings of power and every place that I've been, none of it phases me. Because I understand where I'm from, and I understand what I've had to do and the breaks that I've had in life to get me to where I am, and the duty that I have to those people from Kanike and people who are born in that way.
And you know, sometimes I know, it's quite easy to forget what it feels like to be them.
It's very easy. I mean, it's the trappings of power. You and I, we've transitioned in our lives, and you've moved communities. I joke to people, I'm from Kanike. I don't live in Kanike anymore. You know, my kids are born both in the U.S. My two younger kids are born in the U.S. I've lived overseas. I've traveled around the world, as you said. I've come back. I'm a government minister. But I like to, as you know, use the hashtag Kanike Bobo, Kanike Minister. I love to go back to my communities. I love to be associated with the east end of Freetown.
How often do you go back there?
Frankly, not as often as I would love to, but whenever there is, for example, football competitions, Clintonians, they invite me. I go to do the kickoffs whenever I have opportunities to go do distribution and stuff. So at least every month or so I go back.
Is the house still there where you were born?
The house is still there. It's a completely different house. The Bambodino did it again. It's no longer there, but the mark is there. I went there and I was looking for the exact spot.
You have a photo?
Where this
You get your guys to take a photo?
Yes. I took a photo of exactly the spot that I was born, and I'll share it with you. And it was, yeah, so it's completely different, but where you're standing next to the old quarters there, you can see the sprawling slum that's developed and even become bigger and bigger as a slum. People living on.
And you said you used to stammer very badly.
I started. It's again. Most people know me as it's a bit talk, you talk, but I couldn't get my words out for a long time as a kid. I was a bad stammerer.
What age?
The thing is, I don't remember the transition. I just, I think around maybe the age of 11, 12, I stopped stammering. But in my first few years in school, I would struggle when I was speaking. I would be hitting I remember my kids in the playground making fun of me. And interestingly, even my son too, my second son has had problems with speech. And it gave me hope because, now I don't have any problems. And he's
How did it disappear? How did it end?
I don't remember. I just think that I outgrew it. I think I had it.
You didn't do anything, no therapy, no.
I didn't. My son is going through. My son has been through therapy. I didn't go through. I didn't. My parents, we did not have the opportunity. I don't even think people saw it as like something that you require.
It was just normal.
I think it was just normal. Like, just stop. In fact, they used to. I remember like somebody would do something bad to me, and I would try to go explain, and they would say, "Come on, I say the talk though, don't tire. Just come on, because it was like, and especially when when you are angry and upset, the words are difficult to come. I think over time too, even now, I know if I'm like extremely, if I go too fast or extremely, so I feel like also I learned to use it in a way. And I like to say to people, because I couldn't get my words out, I spent a lot of time thinking about words, and that's why now I have a pretty good grasp of words.
You had the same uniform on from class 1 to 4. How was that possible? What school was that?
Kaneke School, Bishop Crowder Memorial Primary School is right in the middle of Kaneke.
How is it possible for you to use the same uniform for 4 years?
My mom tells the story of how.
By the way, share life.
Yes, my mom is alive.
Where is she now?
She's here. She lives in Lumley. She's a retiree. She was a teacher for 39 years, a primary school teacher. Obviously, the absolute hero of my life. And so my mom was a single mom. We struggled. We went to school. We had to go sell. We got money. We came back. We cooked. Our staple was the rice and pepper. You know, we mastered that. Rice, pamine, pepper. That's what we ate. And even for me, I didn't even realize that it was a sign of extreme poverty. But it's what we ate. We lived, in this, again, it was 1 bedroom. My mom, my 2 sisters were all stuck in there. But at a very young age, I quickly realized that my mom was struggling and that I had this sense of duty towards my mom. So if she's managed to get me that 1 uniform, I will go to school. I will not play in my uniform. I will try to come home as clean as I went to school. Also, there was a little bit of laziness in that.
Did you play football?
Because I played football, but at home. So that's why a lot of kids I went to school with are surprised to see that I was a pretty good footballer. Because I'll come home and I'll go now and go play, but not in my school uniform. I didn't want to break my school uniform. I'll have 1 shoe. Of course, our parents would buy for us. They would call those shoes. They look up the sky. And the shoes, they will buy 2 or 3 sizes
ahead.
Mama, they buy the one say, this is the way I take class 4 from class 1. So we pack in a fine one, and then we wear it. So, I think it was really in my mind that we didn't have a lot. And so I had the sense of duty. Even with like kids and pens, if you gave me a pen, I took care of my property. My pencil, I took care of it. I don't know why I got that. But I also say I went to the Albert Academy, which is a pretty good school that's notorious for people jumping fences. You're an academician. I went there 6 years. Never once did I climb those fences. Never once. Never. In school, I was a good student. I had this, since I was a child, I had this deep sense of there's bigger things. I have to get.
And how did it come about? I've had you over and over each time you talk, and there's always this sense that there's something different than other kids would. How much of that just happened? How can you explain that?
I think it's nature and nurture, circumstance. My mom, seeing her suffer in the ways that I saw her suffer, but my mom she had a saying. She said, "Poor I may be, but bitter blood in me." And what I understood from that, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but what I understood from that was this deep sense of pride that she had. Go big, you go rather sell, we go make gara, we go knack the gara, we go sell pepper, we go sell sweets, we go sell kerosene. It doesn't matter.
And tell me about the kerosene.
But it's just, at the end of the day, you gather those kerosene, you go sell in the neighborhood kerosene day.
Did you have fixed customers that you would go to?
Yeah, you just pass by and they stop you and you sell.
You remember how much a gallon of kerosene used to cost at that point?
Leones, it was in the single digits in the Leones. Kerosene day, 1 Leone, 2 Leone, we'll sing it. We'll have a box.
Let's talk about the box, like the crates like you would use for soft drink.
Yes.
Was it a soft drink crate or something like that?
Yeah, you measure it in a.
So let's talk about the bottles. What kind of bottles did you?
It was the ones that were used by the Sierra Leone brewer at the time, and so you had the ones that were for the beer bottle, the Maltina bottle.
It's funny. I sold kerosene also.
You sell kerosene, yeah.
I sold kerosene, and you had a couple of stuff. So you had either, these tin tomatoes.
Exactly.
That was one. So that was the least that you could go. So people are so small, that's all you could afford.
That's not for the palam.
It's for the lamp now. It's for the lamp.
That's why, because we
It's for the
didn't have
pan.
electric.
It's for the pan
Exactly, as a
lamp.
pan lamp.
You know, shade lamp that was very
Correct.
expensive.
Yes.
That was for top people.
All on a level.
But every house would have a pan lamp, and that's what you put. So you'd have gripe water. There's a gripe water bottle. There's Atwood bitters bottle, like they will sell for palm oil. That's the same way they would sell for. So that's interesting. Then tell me about the ice and the fish.
Oh yes, so my mom will sell ice. In fact, my mom was the master of selling ice. We will spend a lot of time in the evening. You know, the ice, it had the plastic, you had to tie it, and then you do it. You know, she was a school teacher, so she would take them to school and sell them in school. Sometimes we will take some as well.
Well, she wasn't teaching at your primary school?
No, she was not at my school. I never went to my mom's school. She was a teacher in the Anglican school system, so she was at cathedral and schools like that. So that's why we also woke up very early in the morning, and she went to the schools. But we had to help her to get the ice ready, tie them, prepare to take them in the morning. We sold fishball, which was also something that we love. We have to beat it and get it ready in the evening. So in the evening, it was all hands on deck. My mom, my sisters, a ward that was staying with us. We get all these things ready. She has to go. She sell them in school, and when she came back, it's the money that we now use again to get the day going. So I think growing up and going through that created for me a sense of awareness, a sense of duty, and frankly, I like to tell people I have been poor and I didn't like it. I didn't like being poor.
How did you know you didn't like being poor?
Because I saw
a lot of the time you don't even realize you're poor because it's just because everybody around you.
But in this case, we were living not far and with cousins. You know, my cousins were better off, so we'll go visit them.
And that's the only time you would know.
And then you will realize. You sit in a class like the Albert Academy.
Albert Academy, there was big mix.
There was huge mix. Albert Academy, the rich man.
From the top, from the Lebanese guys, driving cars for themselves to school.
Exactly, to school. They will come back and you watch what they afford. And the whole idea of this, and you knew you can never even think of those things.
Never.
My sisters, my mom got them to St. Joseph's Primary School, and they will walk. You know, when we moved to Kisii, my sisters will walk, and my elder sister will carry my younger sister on her back to and back from school. And I saw those things. I saw my mom thinking about, wow, what am I going to do when it was time for school fees? I saw her kind of like really get anxious. Because again, she's a proud woman. She's a proud woman. So that pride transferred to me. And I got this sense of duty quickly, and I know, so even when I was younger going to school, I would keep my lunch. I would save my lunch, and some days I would say, oh, Mama, you don't get money today. I've been saving me lunch again. So I like to say I didn't like to be poor. I didn't enjoy being poor, and so I made a quick resolution as a kid. I'm going to do everything to get out of poverty.
You mentioned something again where you said you didn't think you were poor. The poverty is just an idea.
Yes.
So tell me about that. How did you get to develop that concept? How young were you, or how old were you when you got that idea?
It's two ways to think about poverty, and a lot of the times you see people accept, I think as you said in your introduction, that this is my station, this is my life, and this is it. I rejected that, and I thought of myself as big. I thought of myself as having
and you always had this diminutive figure. You were not, you were always small.
You were always a tiny kid. I was always the shortest.
You always few.
Yeah. I was always the tiny kid. always front in line, front in class, and all that. But I always had this, maybe because of that I had to project strength, and I had to project power, and I had to see myself big.
And it had to come from within.
And it had to come from it. It had to be this deep drive given to me by my mom, and some partly as well my dad, who's also a big thinker and talks and says, no, you're not poor. Poverty is a state of being. It's in your mind. You have to think of yourself as rich, and that's the only way you're going to be truly rich. And I decided I didn't want to remain poor, or for me to be treated in the ways that I've seen society treat people who are poor, not just in material things, but also poor in mind.
And you said that was never going to happen to you.
I knew that I was not going to be poor.
You said your mom taught for 39 years, she was never late to school.
So this is the thing that these are my assets. This is why I say
these are your assets.
The assets in
That's
life.
a nutshell.
The greatest advantages I have in life are, one, my parents are both teachers. My mom is an incredibly driven and disciplined woman. For 39 years, she never took leave. She was always the first at school. Even when we left Oluwaf and she had to come to Cathedral, she woke up earliest, was at school first, was the last person to leave and close those doors. She was the head teacher. Same with my dad. He has the same sense of duty. So I inherited that from them. No matter how small the task you're given, you have to do it in a big way. You know, as minister, people then say, Cee Bah, why the jackass? Every day you get events of duty. I don't know how to.
You don't know how not
small.
to.
I don't know how not to jackass. I have to do this work as if my life depends on it, because I think, you know, that's what Martin Luther King says. You have to do a big job in a small job in a big way. And then that's how you.
Now, but let's talk about intelligence. What would you rate, or what would you rate your intelligence level? Because you said even in primary school, you were top. You were top of the class in primary school.
Yeah.
And the Albert Academy, you were senior prefect.
Of course. Look, I've always been I've been a hardworking, studious person. I've been blessed with, I think, a pretty high IQ.
And so was it natural? How did that come? Was it natural? Was that something how much of it was you?
I just know that by my first results in primary school, I had like an average of 94%. I just know that when the first results came, I knew that that's it. And I understood things. Like the teacher would be teaching and I just understood what you're saying. The times that I didn't do well in school is probably because I was bored. You know, I was just thinking, I knew even in college, I don't need to study every day like everybody else. So by the time I got to university, I knew I don't need to study like everybody else. That I will read the notes once and it will all stick.
Okay.
I will read that note once. And that's not just intelligence, that's just, again, the power to copy things. Like I will look at something one that somebody needs to look at 5 times, and I will just make a mental picture and will stay in my mind.
This is the JB Podcast. I'm Joe Abbas, and my guest today is the Minister for Information and Civic Education, Chernor Bah, we popularly call Cee Bah. Now, I'd like us to do some heavy sprint. Now, Albert Academy, the war, Conakry, and back, and Children of the Nation, 15 years age, something sparked up in you. Let's run us through that in 90 seconds. How did you end up? So where were you when the war broke out?
First in Freetown, obviously, and then we were living in Oluwaf at the time when the war came to Sierra Leone, to Freetown.
So Freetown, you're not talking about January 6th, huh?
January 6th, I was in Oluwaf.
Oluwaf.
Yes.
You know, it's funny. I was also in Wellington.
Really? So we were
January 6th. I was by the cemetery, the Wellington cemetery. Then they came in the camp. We were at the cemetery, Pillar Street, Wellington, just next to the cemetery.
So that's
why I was in
we
January.
We were the ones that ran and came all the way to Texaco, where all we witnessed that. I was right there when they were killing people, and we saw
in the
car
and
in
stuff.
the cars. We got out. We were not in cars, obviously. We were walking, but then we managed to go into low-cost housing, and an angel opened their door, and myself, my mom, and my sister were lying down on the floor and hearing the rebels go through and open doors and kill people very close to the police station there. Mm-hmm. In the morning, we walked out and walked on corpses and walked back to Wellington, and we stayed there. Before that, in 97, 98, when we did the Guinea stuff. Mm-hmm. I think for me, going through war, being displaced, refugee, it's like being born in poverty. It was a continuum of this sense of you can't take anything for granted, but you have to not accept the reality of where you are. You have to always imagine. It's John Paul
say, do not accept the reality.
You can't accept. You can't. You have to always imagine something beyond this limiting reality that you
Would you
find
blame
yourself
people
in.
who And then in the majority, very, sadly enough, they're in the majority where, I was talking about people who believe life just happens. Would you blame them? Is there anything you did, or are we handpicked to think the way we think? People are talking about personality. Is it something? How much of personality is?
Look, I think it's nature and nurture.
And you're telling them do not accept.
Yeah, I think it's nature and nurture. I think some people have it in them, but I think you can always steer it. I don't believe that we are just like blessed with some super genes that make us superb. I think we have had influences in our lives that help us to imagine and to dream. I have been blessed with those influences, as I said, from my mom, my parents. My grandmother, who I like to talk about, she lived past 100 years. She was the fourth wife. She had 12 kids, buried 8 of them as kids. Only 4 of them, including my mom, survived. The most happy-go-lucky person I ever met. Never allowed herself to be defined by the circumstance of her poverty, of the losses that she suffered, of all the limitations.
And people can train themselves to think like they can train themselves to think like that.
She was a village woman.
And possibly that's the challenge. If you're watching this show, that's the challenge. What if it's possible?
Correct.
What if it's possible that you could be different? What if it's possible that you could challenge the circumstances? What if it's possible that you could create a future that is different? And you had the power, you have the ability. You miss 100% of the chances you don't take.
Yeah.
And so it's down to you beginning to believe it's possible to change, it's possible to transform, and that's why we're having this show. We hope you're going to be inspired. When we come back, we will run through the big transition that took place in Cee Bah's life that created this bigger and larger than life character we now know. This is the JAB Show, and it's your life by design. Welcome back. It's the JAB podcast. My guest is the Minister of Information and Civic Education in Sierra Leone, Chernor Bah. Let's talk about this big shift that took place in your life. I understand it was at the age 15. Yeah. How did this come about?
Back then, we used to do Day of the African Child, and UNICEF will organize like a workshop, and they will invite top students from different schools. Albert Academy,
Where did this event take place?
I think it was CCSL Hall, very close to where we are right now. And so we went to this event. It was organized by UNICEF, and other NGOs were there, and they were talking about children's rights. So they had a flyer that I picked up, and it said there's a children's parliament somewhere. And at the end of it, I called all the other top kids that were there. It was about a few kids from schools, and I said, I have this idea. Let's start our own children's parliament in Sierra Leone. And I guess a few of the students said, yeah, good idea, fancy. I was like, no, we should do it. It's actually going to work. Let's make it happen. And so I invited everybody to a meeting, and we said, where's the central location for the meeting? And the central location was St. Joseph's Secondary School Convent, outside. We said they have those outside places, and the place is open, so we can just meet there and have our first meeting.
You didn't have to ask for permission.
We didn't ask for permission. We just went into convent, and by the way, there's a whole lot of story because they kicked us out afterwards. We had to go beg and all that. But we went there, first meeting, we organized ourselves. We said, let's go to the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs. It's just been formed with Charlie Bujama as the minister. We went to see her, and she said, children's parliament? Said, children should not have parliaments. He said,
they should be in school.
Yeah, they should be in school. But if it's a forum, you can organize yourself. We're like, oh yes, we'll take it. Forum, children's forum. As long as we're organized and we get support. And she said, yeah, go and write up and see if you can organize yourself. We went, we wrote a concept, we wrote a constitution.
You didn't write it, so somebody had to help you.
Yeah, of course. My team, we had a team. I had a team of about 10 kids. Timothy Sam, who is now on my team, was one of them. Joseph Abdullahi was one of them. The chief minister, Dr. David Senge, was one of the kids that we were with at the time.
Who was older?
I was older. I'm older than him.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were all together, and so because I was the driver of it, we organized, supported by Plan, the first big meeting, and then we had an elections, and I was elected overwhelmingly as the first president, with a mandate to now set up branches all over the country.
At 15?
Yes.
It's not every day you talk about 15-year-old driving at that.
At the Albert Academy, they used to call me minister without portfolio. I always had a mission. Even in school. They said, you're a minister without portfolio. Every day I have a mission. I was like, I have to go somewhere. I have to go talk at this. So I ended up going to schools. I would speak at the assembly. I would preach about children's rights. They would set up a branch. And you know, before you have it, you know, the UN was here. So they called me and said, we want to support you. Plan, UNICEF, all these agencies started coming through. When we did the big launch, President Amati Jankaba himself was there. And so it gave us this platform that's, you know, we now took as like children.
Didn't they have to find a podium for you somewhere where you stand so that it could be elevated for people to see you?
Exactly. I was a really tiny man. But as I've said, I always had I never saw myself as small. I also like to say, even when I was in Kaneke, even when I was at Albert's Academy, I never saw myself as competing with the people in Kaneke. I always thought of myself as competing with what's the best thing that's happening in the world, and how can I be part of that?
And I'm still intrigued. And you know, as much as I am a fighter, I fight every day. I'm still intrigued. You never thought of yourself as small. Should you help somebody? Take 30 seconds. Help somebody. How can you walk in your mind to not ever think of yourself as small? How do you build it? You know, talk to somebody. How do you explain that?
It's hard to put into words, but I think the best way I would say is it's an imagination. You close your eyes and you imagine yourself as not limited by your circumstance and not limited by anything. You say, if I could be well, why not? It's not asking why.
And you were never around friends. It's not like you were around friends who thought that way, because one of the ways you develop this is to, once you are around people who are thinking at this level, then you would think at this level.
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest dreamer was my mom. And you know, my grandma, who I've referred to, my father, who always will say, you know, what do you want to be? You can be anything you want.
You can be anything you want.
You can be anything you want. And so because of that, I always thought, you see, I got to a point where I was almost afraid to say what I wanted to be, because I was like, maybe that would be too small. If I say it will be too small. I have to think of what is even bigger than that.
So you started getting this attention from all over the place. How did it transition international? Let's
getting all this attention. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was here. I was invited to, so I, you know, on the eve of September 11, the big attack in the US, I was at UNICEF being briefed to go attend the UN General Assembly session. And I was going to meet with, you know, all world leaders. And I was supposed to go address the UN General Assembly. They were going to do a big session there. So the UN had recognized the work that we were doing. We were pretty successful in trying to tell the story of children in this country. We wrote the child-friendly version of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. By the way, the process of writing that, UN supported me to go around the country, but we came and they gave us access to a computer at UNAMSIL at the time, where the hotel now, Radisson Blu. We will sleep there to get that report done in time. I stayed there all night, working, writing these reports. As a child, we will sneak in because that's the only place I had access to a computer. So we got all those things done. And I think the world saw that we had the drive, we had the passion, the story that we told when I was invited to testify at the Truth Commission, and I did that. And so from then, the United Nations was doing a global report on the impact of war on children, and they wanted credible voices to be involved in that process, and they wanted a young person to lead that. That was my first opportunity to now go. I was finishing university. I got a call. They said, the UN is inviting you to come to New York to come.
So the Children's Forum continued even when you were in university? Or
the other thing I did with Children's Forum is we set a rule that when you are 18, you have to step down. So I stepped down when I was 18 and had a successful transition. Always believed in that it's important to not stay in a place until you have outstayed your welcome, and that the best sign of success is having a successor. So for me, I transitioned and handed over power to Abubakar Messe Kamara, who calls himself now Messe Leone, my good brother. And he continued. But I stayed on supporting. I was head now of the Voice of Children radio project, which had been set up by the UN to support children's voices in the peace process in this country. And I continued as an activist. At Trabe College, I was a student leader. I was Secretary General of the Student Union. And I got involved in other things. I continued to write. I continued to speak up on issues. And so first, it was actually Plan International that invited me to go help them set up what they call a Children's Advisory Board in Ireland. I went there. I got invited to go to Norway to help them think about children's participation in Norway. I got invited to the UK.
And that is white kids. Now they tell you to help white kids organize themselves. It wasn't African kids. Nope. You became an expert. Then Norway, then continue. Take it from
Norway. I went to the UK. I went to London. I went to the UK. I mean London and Ireland as well. I also spent time in France with all these institutions.
You speak French?
I don't. So they gave me a translator.
Okay.
So institutions saying, come help us, give us your experience, facilitate other young people. The EU noticed, they invited me to Brussels. I spent time there advising them on how you can actually do youth or children's participation in a meaningful way. I was doing those things, going back again. I continued my minister without portfolio function when I was at the university. And right as I was graduating, in fact, I missed my graduation from Trabe College because the UN had called for me to move to New York to help them do a global consultation on children's voices in armed conflict. So we did a report called Will You Listen? Young Voices from Conflict Zones. That report is still available. It was seen as a seminar report. I was invited to present it to the Security Council, which we did. And then we got money to do a documentary from it. For it, I traveled again to war zones, Lebanon, Uganda. I went to, again, another emergency setting in the US, in the Philippines, so Liberia. I spent time there with a filmmaker, interviewing other young people, asking them, getting their voices and collating that and doing a documentary that is also available. It's called Youth Zones. It's online. And after that, because one of the stops I made was in Liberia. And so when that project ended, the Liberia resident representative of the UN at the time said I should come to Liberia to help them, because Sierra Leone and Liberia are so similar, to help them do their youth policy and their youth engagement plan. So I was one of the co-authors of the Liberia Youth Policy. So I left New York, I went to Liberia, I stayed there for about a year and a half. I created the first UN youth program there. I led on supporting the Liberia transition with young people. And it was from Liberia I applied to grad school. I applied to one school. I knew the one program I wanted to go to. I tailored my CV to that one program. I applied to it. It's probably not good advice to people to just apply to one place. You should probably apply to many. But I knew that if I applied to that program, I would get it.
What program was that?
It was the Kroc Institute program. It's a program for international peace and conflict studies. I loved it because it was a practical master's. You were going to spend 1 year in class, and 1 year you spend it in the field. They will pay for you. And it was also fully funded. So I applied. They gave me a full scholarship and paid my ticket from Liberia to come back to Sierra Leone to pack my bags and fly to the US. So that's how I got there. And so that 1 year, to round up the story, I did 1 year in class at the University of Notre Dame, one of the top 20 universities in the US. And they said, where do you want to go to do your research? I looked at all the options. I said, what place is farthest from Sierra Leone?
Why did you want something that was...
Because I was already familiar with it. I was already an expert here. I wanted to expand my horizons. I hear you talk a lot about expanding your horizons.
Yeah.
So I went to the Philippines. Fantastic time. I spent 7 months in the Philippines researching, making lifelong friends, working there with a Catholic NGO called CRS. It's here also in Sierra Leone. I was on their team writing a report. And at the time, mobile phones were just coming on. And in the Philippines, I had a big afro. And everywhere I went, people were looking at me.
You still have the photo?
Oh, yes, I do. I have a photo of me. It's like a massive afro in my head. And they always wanted to touch my hair. They'd be like, he's a black man, a black man. It was because I was not even in the city. I was in the south of the Philippines in a place called Davao. Beautiful place, one of the cleanest places I've been in the world. So those are the experiences that I have. So it gave me a chance to see the world. And it made me realize that I have it reaffirmed, every step I've taken reaffirmed that position I started with. Nobody can make me small. I know I'm not small. I might have a small stature, but
nobody can make me small. Nobody can make me small. And introducing Michelle Obama, Malala Yousafzai, just roll out those things. How did they get to happen?
So after the Philippines, I came back. I completed my studies, and here's the part where, again, after grad school, I said I'm not just going to take any job. I was now jobless because you finish grad school. I left my job at the UN to go. So I was like, okay, what do I do? I was looking for the right job. But I stayed on my friend's couch in the Bronx for a while. And then I got a call from Nike, the shoe company. And they were doing some foundation work. And they said they were looking for somebody that had like the kind of background that I had.
How did they get to know about you?
And so, because of my work in Liberia.
Okay.
So because I had done that work in Liberia, I had a contacts there that knew my work in Liberia, and I had written to people after grad school and just look and say, I'm out of grad school, I'm looking for a job, I want to stay in the US for a while, I didn't just want to come home. So Nike invited me, I went there for a big interview. A small anecdote I must tell you about this interview. You know, in Sierra Leone, if they say you're going for an interview, you get ready. I didn't have money by this time. So my friend was a lawyer. I had this white friend of mine in the Bronx. I went to meet him at the law courts because he only had one suit. He's a bit bigger than me. He only had one suit that was small. So that suit he was wearing on that day I was supposed to fly to Portland. So Nike was flying me. So I went to meet him in the cab. He came inside the cab. I got him his clothes. He changed and gave me the suit.
In the cab?
In the cab. And I took that suit, I went to the airport, I flew to Portland. Now I got there, Nike is a pretty chill organization. It's young people in jeans, in shorts. Me, I'm
in your suit,
three-piece suit that is burying me.
Three and a half piece.
Yeah, this is how I am in the suits. And I show up, and it's the summer, right? It's like hot. And I'm walking into that campus, and you know, it's like the kind of thing where you're like so out of place.
You're
so completely out of place. But I guess I aced the interview. Because I guess they looked at me, I was so out of place.
Yeah, but once you started talking.
But once I started talking, they took me around campus, and I was like, It was really, because the Nike headquarters is called Campus, and we walked around it, and I had lunch. I had lunch with the CEO, I had lunch with people, and they're like, He's a sharp man, he will bring something different. I flew back and they offered me a job. A few weeks later, I moved to Portland. I was a brand manager. That's why I learned a lot of my comm skills, because they're the best.
What did you read you said peace and conflict? What did you read in university? Political science.
At Fairview College. So political science, international peace and conflict. This is why I also say to young people, it's not what you read.
It's not what you're reading. It's not what you're reading.
The university education, it teaches you how to learn.
And then you can now go and learn anything you want to learn.
I went to Nike. In fact, when I arrived, there were different options, portfolio, this, that. And I said, what's the one opportunity that I have in this institution that I will never have the chance to learn elsewhere at this level? And it was branding. And so I was trained by the head of the Serena Williams team. So, you know, Serena was an athlete. And so I went in there, it took me to all the labs, how they start thinking to develop one shoe. The idea of they have to think about a very specific person. They never develop for
a persona.
For five.
They have a persona.
They create a persona, and that persona has a place thing we develop. We spend time on that persona, and how they think about that persona. And the reason they choose that persona is this idea of the threshold. If that persona wants it, so it's always like maybe somebody who's like maybe 18, 19, or 16. That's who we're designing for. Now, those people, because older people want to be hip and young, so they want to be 16, right? Young kids, that's who that. So they look for that middle age, and then they think about it, and every process that goes into it, it's so far. You just think it's just a shoe, right? but learning about the comps, about the language that they use, and then meeting the athletes. So on campus, Serena will come, spend time with us on our team. The late Kobe Bryant, before he died, he was a fantastic Nike athlete. He came on campus a lot and gave freebies. Those kinds of things also just opened your imagination. And you're like, wow, the world is big.
You did any work with them in Ethiopia?
And then that's when, so I spent time, and then the foundation was going to go to Ethiopia to start the first youth brand in Ethiopia. It was called Yenia. It was in partnership with FCDO, the British government. And so they were looking for who from headquarters would be willing
to go there,
to go to Ethiopia. I was like, yeah, Ethiopia.
And that's how you went there.
And I went to Ethiopia. I spent a year. I just met an Ethiopian recently at an event, and I mentioned what I worked on, and he basically got up and gave me a hug. He said it's the most popular brand in Ethiopia because we did it with Nike thinking into development. That's what brought me closer back to development. So it was a bridge project. So it was the idea that girls in Ethiopia are, have so inherently disadvantaged. And so we wanted to bring a new brand. It was a music band. It was like, they caricatured it as the Ethiopian Spice Girls. But the idea is that to get girls to imagine, same thing that we're talking about.
Imagine.
Big about themselves, to see themselves. So I worked on that brand, fantastic. The day it launched, the week before, again, because I continued to do my other advocacy work, writing, I had just been nominated to join the United Nations Global Education First Initiative and to be the global youth representative on that.
Now let's go into a couple of stuff.
Yes.
How did you get to introduce Michelle Obama?
So that is this position.
Let's go.
So I got nominated to be the youth representative on the UN Global Education First Initiative. I asked Nike to to basically give me time off to go to New York so I can do this work with the UN because I was excited by it. The UN Secretary General appointed top global leaders in the world, and for some reason I was appointed as the only youth on there. And so we created a team, and Gordon Brown was one of those that the UN Secretary General appointed, and he wanted us to co-create a movement hub. It was called A World at School that will help us mobilize the world for education. And so myself, Gordon Brown, and Gordon Brown's wife were co-founders of this. So he wanted to co-found it with a young person. So I got to be the chair of this, and then the Secretary General also wanted to set up a youth advocacy group. He named me the chair of 12 young people from all over the world. And then Malala was shot. As soon as they made that appointment, Malala was shot, I got the privilege of now leading this global movement of young people to call for justice for Malala and to use that movement. So we created I Am Malala hashtag. We did all these petitions. So now I was organizing at the global level. I was in the UN, in the Green Zone, and all of that. I introduced Malala when she gave her big speech at the UN. I was chair of that event. The entire world was there. There's a picture of me in the front page of the New York Times sitting next to Malala, of Washington Post, every media around the world.
I thought I was going to see a copy of that somewhere.
See, I try not to keep mementos, but I have them. I try not to display those mementos. I just try to keep it simple. Because I remember that day when I finished at the UN introducing Malala, and I went back home. I was staying with my friends in the Bronx in New York still, and I was sitting down with them, and then the TV comes on, and I'm on CNN, and these guys are all looking at it they're like, wow, that's you right in here.
Is it you or somebody else? In the Bronx.
In the Bronx. And I was like, me, I'm in the Bronx. And I was like, me, I'm from Kaniki. You won't understand.
You don't
Nothing
understand.
is too big. Nothing is too small. For me, it's just life. I'm just going through that. So it was after that, and then because of that work, Michelle Obama was also coming to the UN to give her first big speech on education. By that time, because of my position, I had been advising Michelle Obama. She was starting her girls' education initiative. So I was one of the people that was advising her team. I would go to the White House and help them think about how they were designing this. And when she was coming to give that big speech again at the UN General Assembly, there was a lot, I'm telling you, there's a lot of politics. Everybody at that time, you know, Michelle Obama is a rock star. She's probably the biggest global star in politics. And everybody wanted to be next to her, sitting position, who was going to be sitting next to her. And she said she wanted me to sit next to her. So there's a picture, I'm sitting next to her. And me, I was already used to the UN. So there's a scene where somebody starts speaking in French, and she's struggling with like how to switch the thing. And I was like, I'm helping her to do it, you know. But before she came, and you know, and then they said if to speak, they asked her team, and the team said they want the young person who's this leader that's been working with them to introduce her. I was really, I had butterflies in my tummy. It was one of those things where I knew that, wow, you cannot mess this up.
You can't.
This is a moment. This is a moment. This is like one moment that life is made out of moments, right? You remember that. And so I remember thinking through that speech and thinking, what do I want to say that will capture her and capture the essence of her? But what I remember most fond about it is before Michelle Obama came to the room, keep in mind, heads of states are in this room. Aung San Suu Kyi had just won her Nobel Prize. She's in the room, like the world is there. Huh? The Americans, they come in and they're giving us a brief. We're not allowed to hug Michelle Obama. We're not allowed to shake her hands, you know. They are like, only if she gives you her hand, then you cannot give her your hand. Even the sitting position, they didn't confirm it until last minute, and then they put me next to her. So I was like, oh, cool. So then I was like, I shouldn't hug her. So then when she comes, she gives me a hand. I was like, oh, why not? She likes me. I shake her hand. And then after that, I go and I deliver this introduction of her. And she comes to the stage. I just wanted to shake her hand and walk away. And she just opens her arms like this and gives me the biggest hug ever. And it was really lovely. And I was like, oh, I never want to let go. So no, it was a beautiful.
That's a brilliant one. And again, why we're sharing this today, and the minister keeps saying is kind capable, and not faced by the office that he's in. He has a life that is bigger than this office. You have a life that is bigger than this office, way bigger than this office. So it's the office actually not making it. It's the imagination, it's the picture he has of himself in his future. And anybody can create that future just by allowing us to inspire you, just by allowing what he has, what we've been talking about over the last couple of minutes, to inspire you to begin to believe again. Somebody says that, you know, the only belief that matters is this. If you think you can, because your behavior will follow that belief. Yeah. If you think you can't, you won't, because your behavior will follow that belief. I hope you're going to be inspired today. We have 2 more laps to go for this podcast today, but we believe something is going to jump into you to believe. No matter where you were born, there's a space for you. If you could imagine it, you could create it. This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design. All right, welcome back. This is the JB Podcast. I'm Joe Abbas Bango, and my guest today is the Minister of Information and Civic Education, Sierra Leone, Chernor Bah. We have 2 laps to go. I want us to move to the next level. The first one would be Purposeful. Let's talk about Purposeful, what's behind it, the energy you put into this. Particularly, I think I shared with you the last time we had a sit down around radical inclusion, how I felt about, not just me, that was the thing that, you know, entire Sierra Leone felt that girls who were pregnant
shouldn't go to school,
shouldn't be allowed because it was bad influence.
Correct.
It was bad influence, you know, amongst, you know, their colleagues. Now, mix this together with Purposeful and say how did this come to be, and that was super radical.
Yeah, the idea of Purposeful is rooted in my story. As I said, I was raised by a single mom. I've got 2 sisters. And Purposeful came because of Ebola. I was now working with the UN. And then when Ebola struck, I tried to come to Sierra Leone, and they tried to stop me. And I didn't like being stopped, because I said, this is my home. And I was threatened that if I came back somehow, when I went back, I would not be allowed to go to work, I would be banned. And I just thought that was unjust. So I quit my job, and I got invited to work for an institution called Population Council that was focused on trying to solve emergencies, and particularly on girls. So this was something that I really wanted to do. So I built that portfolio. Then at some point I realized too, this institution, Population Council, is an old institution, very well established by the Rockefeller money. It's one of those big institutions in New York. But I wanted to do it in a different way. I had a vision of what I thought was missing in terms of girls, combining advocacy with program and building an institution that is rooted in Africa that's not colonized. That the idea that somehow sense, aid, resources only flow in a unidirectional way. From the West to us as recipients that we're used to, the NGO and the white man encounter. I really wanted to change that. I said, there is an opportunity here, we can create something different. So I partnered with other folks, and I was one of the co-founders, came up with this idea of starting a Sierra Leone, Africa-rooted organization with global ambitions. I used the contacts that I had and the resources that we had, and we mobilized. To start Purposeful, we had $3 million in the bank. We had raised about $3 million. And we did that because, again, I've always believed, I had a boss when I was at the Population Council. Her big idea to me was, ideas lead, money follow.
Ideas lead, and money follow.
That's it. She said, she also has a big ideas woman. She's like, she always had a big idea. And when you're listening to her, you're like, Judith, where's the money going to come from? She's like, don't worry about the money. Let's get the idea right.
Idea leads, and money follow.
The money
follows the idea.
The money will always follow. So I always believed in that. So we had this idea, we had initial disappointment, but then we had $3 million in the bank. We started, but I really did not want us to just be like another one of those small saloon pockets NGOs. We had big ambitions. We wanted to give money. We wanted to take money and move money, not just sincerely. You mentioned over 150 countries during COVID. We expanded, we bought and took over other global other global NGOs are based in the UK. Purposeful became the home of it in Sierra Leone. We have bought a building here. I bought a building last year, over $1 million. We built it. I think it's one of the best places in Sierra Leone to work. It's a very accessible building. We invested in it. We invested in people at Purposeful. That was something I'm very proud of. That's why I like to tell people, as you said, I love this job. It's the greatest honor of my life to be asked to serve, but I didn't come here because I didn't have something. Purposeful, we raised over $50 million. We were by far the richest national NGO in this country, by far. In terms of endowments, in terms of resources, we had money. And we were moving money not just here, but across the world. But again, this is the point about ideas leading. We had a clear moral compass, to your point on pregnant girls. It was an issue that for me was so clear. It was a symptom of bigger problems of the patriarchy. The problem of how we treat girls, of how girls are abused and then left to basically suffer the consequences. And we use a moral lens to judge them for the very abuse that we have subjected them to. And then take away their future. The one thing that could help them to get out of that abuse was education. And then we say, hey, first the state says you're not supposed to have sex before 18. And if you do, you have been violated. So therefore, that girl who is pregnant is already a victim of a violation. But what's the one thing that is the ticket to her life outside of that violation? It's education. And then you ban her from going to school. And the ban is so overwhelming. It says you have done something bad. It judges you. It says you're not allowed here. It says you are bad. So it stigmatizes and diminishes you. It makes you feel like you should be ashamed of yourself. And by the way, nobody ever got pregnant on their own, except Mary, the mother of Jesus. Apart from her, everybody else. So, but there was no recourse to the context and who. Yeah. So for us at Purposeful, it was clear that this is an issue we will use to fight and advocate to address the bigger issues of what Purposeful was formed for, which is for the liberation of adolescent girls. And it was a perfect issue because the ban had been put in place because of Ebola. It was clearly not thought through. Dr. Bah was the Minister of Education. Whenever I got them to argue with me, I knew we had the argument on our side. And so we started this big national conversation in this country. We had so many back and forth. At the time, I was living at home with the current chief minister. He was the education minister. Well, first he was head of DSTI. He was in the middle of this big debate. And I was posting, I was the face of that campaign. And then
did he get it? Did he get it at a point in time?
And then they made
how long it took David to get it?
Look, from when David was in the US before we came, he was with us. But he was not a public champion of the issue.
Okay.
He was never against pregnant girls going to school. He just thought it will never be accepted. At the time, he was trying to play a politician, and he was a politician. So, but he was an internal advocate, and I knew that the arguments. I knew we had him on the argument. I just didn't have him yet on the public commitment. So, everybody knew we were close friends. The day he was announced as minister, I went on Facebook and I posted. I congratulated him and I said, with David as minister, I know now that this draconian ban will end. And so people said, oh, I'm making it impossible for him. I said, yeah, I'm going to put him on the spot. And we did put him on the spot. And we worked with him. He set up a task force that he made Purposeful chair of on the particular issue of this pregnant girls ban. And of course, we did the research. Again, that's the thing about the way we did our advocacy. Because we had the resources, we did the research. We did the studies. We could show, we could really demonstrate, and we got the voices of girls. We sued the government. Many people don't know this. Purposeful took the government of Sierra Leone to court, the ECOWAS court, and we won. We partnered with other people, and we won that case. But we were not relying on the ECOWAS judgment alone. We were also engaging. And when, after Dr. David Senge's Ministry of Education, in fact, he asked us to draft the press release when he finally convinced Cabinet that it was time to end this ban. We drafted that press release. The Ministry of Education, released it. And then we started working together with him on the policy of radical inclusion. Purposeful was the lead author of that policy. I've never really said that publicly, but we wrote that policy and we handed it over to the ministry. But that for me is how advocacy is supposed to be. You champion a cause that is now owned by government, and then the government takes it forward. It's never about personal glory. It's always about what's the cause. And that is the goal here. If the goal is about getting pregnant girls into school and challenging the stereotypes about girls and challenging the patriarchy and making sure we fight for inclusion, it's not about the glory I get. It's about that.
I'll read something that is tied to that. Then we'll go to the last lap. We would have to have around 2 of this. What it says, I'll read something you said to me. We've been, like I said, this has been coming for a long time. Yes. And each time we sit inside, we meet, I'll push you around. But you shared something with me. You said, you don't create sustainable change by investing in the people with power and trying to change their mind. There's no evidence of power giving up power voluntarily. The evidence is you build the power of those without it, and then they can challenge the status quo. And you're now Minister of Information.
Well, I think I have the right ministry for that quote. I absolutely believe in that. And that's why I like to say I'm still an activist in government. I still believe in people power. We're trying to pass certain laws. I continue to say to the activists.
So you still believe in people power?
I absolutely believe in people power. I believe that the only power that is real power is the power of the people. I believe that those of us in governments who get the privilege, extraordinary privilege of sitting in cabinets, we're human beings. And the idea of power, I always believe power is an intoxicant. You and I, you can have good intention and good things.
Yeah, once you get to
power is a drug. It's a potent drug. It has the capacity to ruffle you and to make you become something else if you don't have the right moral compass and the right systems around you. I love the story of all the big accomplishments in the United States, and they tell the story of how President Johnson, who was, reputed to be one of the most progressive presidents in America, he will meet with the activists and say to them, I agree with you, now go make me do it. Go make me do it. This is what we did to David.
Okay.
We had to make him do it. We knew he was with us, but we had to organize. We had to show. We have to do the evidence. That's people's power. That's how that's how democracy works. And that's how democracy has to work. It's not the idea that we've elected our leaders and we just let them go and they just do what they want to do. But the real power is if you can hold them accountable. Show them that you want to hold them accountable and demonstrate that, hey.
A government minister cannot be talking like that. I mean,
well,
you cannot.
His Excellency made me Minister of Civic Education.
Okay, so
as
civic
a Minister of
education
Civic
is part
Education,
of building awareness.
My job is to build awareness and consciousness in citizens and say to them, be part of democracy, be part of governance. Believe in your power. Believe that you can make the change because this country belongs first to you. My kid likes to ask me because, since he was born, I was always my own boss. So now I turn to him. He says, oh, Dad, you have to go out. I say, yeah, because my boss calls. I said, but Dad, I said, who's your boss? I said, Madabio is my boss. He says, so Madabio is your boss. So who's Madabio's boss? I said, you are. My 7-year-old. I said, you are Madabio's boss. That's how it works. You are a citizen. You're young, but very soon, Madabio is supposed to be working for you, and that's what he does. And that's how the equation has to work. But I think oftentimes we forget that. Because in the power politics, we centralize the people who are in the room and not those for whom we are supposed to be in the room. And that, for me, is something I try not to forget.
How would you make sure this, I hinted something at the beginning where I said it's so easy to forget what it feels like to be them. How would you, what are you going to continue to do to make sure you never forget what it feels like to be them at Kanike, to be them at Olwaf, to be them who are going without. Because once you lose that, and then it's a slippery path. It's a slippery path. That's when you said the intoxicant gets in.
I love to say my friends are still my friends. I don't change my friends. I meet new people, but my friends are still my friends. I play football every weekend still with the people that I've been playing with. I go to the same place I play pool.
What wing do you play?
I'm a very good striker. You saw when Cabinets played against Wartime, I scored the 2 goals. I'm a very good striker. I also play on the right wing, but I can play in the middle too.
So you support any team in the Premier League?
Of course, I'm an Arsenal fan, and I'm Eastern Lions and Clintonians. Eastern Lions, Sierra Leone is.
I'm Man United and Eastern Lions. Man United.
Those don't go together. You don't mix up the equation. I'm an avid Arsenal fan, so my condolences last night.
Yeah, thank you.
We gave you a thrashing. But I think the ways you keep yourself grounded is exactly what you and I have talked about, is keeping your roots, reminding myself. And sometimes when I do the public post, it's not to remind the outside world, it's to remind myself. Sometimes I'm speaking to myself through a post that this is who I am. And my mom used to say, nobody is better than you.
And you're not better than anybody.
You're not better than anyone else. So that is a compass. It's the kind of thing that keeps you. But to be reminded of that often is to go back to my village, is to go to Kanike, is to sit with my friends, is to eat with my team, is to realize that at the end of the day, you're just not a man, you're a human being. And this position is fleeting. I always say,
and you could wake up one morning and it would please the Excellency for change your mind.
And for me, that's not going to change who I am. I will still be who I am. I will still have the same passion and the drive, and I will still be successful.
Let's go to the final lap. This is a Jab show. This is JB podcast, and my guest today is Minister of Information and Civic Education. Intriguing, I think we don't share a couple of stuff, but it's the final lap. And this has to do with your ministry, Civic Education,
yes,
and the big drive you have. We've shared some stuff in the past. I am somebody who believes that we have to believe in our country to be able to make the change that is required. And unless we see Sierra Leone as bigger than every division we had, whether it's tribal, regional, ethnic division, unless being a Sierra Leonean becomes more important than our political parties, and I'm saying this in the presence of a government minister, but this is what I believe, yeah. And I'm saying this is what I believe, that unless being a Sierra Leonean is bigger than anything else, any other nomenclature that we have, whether it's regional, it's politics, we can never succeed as a nation. Now, that's something I believe, because we're always going to be dividing ourselves. Now, you're on a big drive to whip up. In the midst of politics, there's competition in politics. If I'm in power, it means you're not in power, and I have to find a way to keep myself there. But how would you, in this mix, still whip up something we need in this country, that being Sierra Leoneans would be bigger, would be more important, that we would find room for compromise, that if we find things that are for the good of this country, we would lay aside political differences, ethnic differences, regional differences, and say, let's fight together to make this happen. Is this theory? Is this utopia? Is this just talking because we learned a few grammar? Is this possible?
I think part of being like you and I is you have to be an optimist. My wife calls me an incurable optimist.
Incurable optimist. I've had somebody. I've had Shadi.
Yes, exactly.
Shadi says that. Shadi says that. I believe to a fault. I always believe in the good in people.
You have to. I think as an activist, I say we're social engineers. We're in the process. We have to.
I like that. Social engineers.
You have to create
what does not even exist.
What does not exist, and in this case, you can learn from other models. I refuse to believe, as some people do, that Salon people they will just backward. I win as soon as God make we Salon man is special. No, I've lived every place in the world. We're not just special. Given the right circumstances, we'll behave like anybody else. The right incentives and disincentives.
The right incentives and disincentives and disincentives.
The same thing like anybody else. That's why when Sierra Leoneans go to the US,
they behave. They go to Europe, they behave well.
It's incentives and sanctions. If you have those two things, you will do just the right thing, and so you learn from other places. The thing I try to do as minister, first, we started this campaign hashtag Salon Big Pass We All.
Yeah.
To your point, until the country is bigger than us.
Forget it.
And I've tried to use the platform that we have to say, the government platform doesn't belong to SLPP. It belongs to the government and the people of this country. We work for you. When we announce our press conference, I say, because we work for you, we can report to you. We're hosting a big festival, biggest ever, next week, that government should come and report by sections, zones, on what we accomplish. It's the idea that you place the citizens at the center. But to your bigger points about civic duty and trying to imbibe that, we suffer from a colonized mentality. We suffer from the idea that, if somebody says you don't know where you're from, it's very difficult for know where
you're going.
Our history is told from a very singular perspective that doesn't glorify us, that treats us as people that things happen to, not people that makes things happen.
That makes things happen, yeah.
And that's huge. We were somehow discovered. Our name is a mistake. Our national symbols don't have anything to do with us. Even when we are speaking, we choose to speak a language that most of our people don't even understand. Even when we are supposed to be speaking to the whole country. We punish our children in school for speaking the language they speak at home. Do you know how much colonized your mind has to be?
To do that.
To think that you punish your child for speaking in a language that is their primary language of communication at home. Language.
That is another radical thinking.
Yes. But until you're radical in your imagination, you cannot get to the place.
So what's the argument that says, if they're going to be dealing in English, they're going to be working, dealing with, people who the way to communicate is English, and why not get them practice how to speak and to write in English?
Argument is called China, it's called Korea, it's called Ethiopia.
Because they all do it in their own language. There's no excuse.
Their kids in their English is just a language. And the science says if the kid's brain is actually structured well with their own foundational language, it's easier for them to learn other languages and to communicate better. The science is clear. UNESCO made this recommendation in 1960. Think about it.
Just before independence.
Yes, the kid in my village, in the south, where my mom comes from, never spoken English in her life. Nobody in her home speaks English. She walks to the first day of school. The teacher is obliged to speak to that kid in English alone. That's criminal. That undermines the learning process. That's like you don't do that to a kid. If a kid comes into a class, you want to teach a kid something, you have to start with what the kid knows and use what the kid knows. A is not for apple. In my village, they don't have apple. You have to teach them what A is.
In what they can relate to.
In the language that they understand. And you use that as a building block. Yes, you have to start teaching them English because they have to interact with the world. But the best inventions in China and Korea were not done because these people speak English. You go to this country, they don't even speak English. They don't even speak good English. The Chinese ambassadors here, you listen to them, they don't speak the most fluent English. They struggle. But tell me whether they have more patents than we do, whether they have more inventions than we do. So it's this idea, it's this fanciful idea that we were taught, and it was colonized. It was intentional. It was used to make us feel small. They told us that when Baibue stood up to fight for our independence, they call it a hot tax war. Baibue mobilized other chiefs. It was our war of independence. It was them saying, no, you cannot tax us.
For things we own when we
are not part of
it.
But they wanted to be free. They wanted to basically say, to have control over their own lives. But how do we tell it? We say in a hot tax war, to reduce them further. These primitive people. It's a narrative.
That's why I said, well, we need to have a second go at this. But then, I like this direction. We need to have a whole show to break this down.
I'm excited by that. We have a whole policy that we have launched that we are bringing forward to the public because we want to have provocative conversations.
I would go through that and make sure the next session we do is really, because actually it's really thinking like that says question. You begin to question all of those things you believed. That's when change begins.
Bob Marley and Haile Selassie says, emancipate
yourself from mental slavery.
That's the biggest emancipation that we require in this country. We are enslaved. When I started talking in Korea at the press conferences, people say, oh, why? I went to Parliament. I said, you know why? I've attended many campaigns, rallies. I've never had any politician speak at a rally in English. Never.
Yeah, they always do it in a language that
because they understand that is when you need to communicate. So as soon as you have the power, you change the language to a language that's only
we need to have a second go at this. But then, I like this direction. We need to have a whole show to break this down.
I'm excited by that. We have a whole policy that we have launched that we are bringing forward to the public because we want to have provocative conversations.
I would go through that and make sure the next session we do is really, because actually it's really thinking like that says question. You begin to question all of those things you believed. That's when change begins.
Bob Marley and Haile Selassie says, emancipate
yourself from mental slavery.
That's the biggest emancipation that we require in this country. We are enslaved. When I started talking in Korea at the press conferences, people say, oh, why? I went to Parliament. I said, you know why? I've attended many campaigns, rallies. I've never had any politician speak at a rally in English. Never.
Yeah, they always in a language that
because they understand that is when you need to communicate. So as soon as you have the power, you change the language to a language that's only understood by 20% of the people. There's something wrong with that equation. So I think to your bigger point, we have to reclaim our narrative. We have to tell a story whereby Baibue is not a hot tax war, is a warrior of independence. We have to tell a story. We have to retell the same story,
but
centers Chernor Bah as a true hero, because he was a hero, that centers the people that fought for us, that says, oh, we are big people. We are people that are capable of big things.
I will change our Civic's books to carry those stories, because that's the way you embed it. That's the way you embedded those things.
Now. This is what we're trying to do. We just developed the strategy. UNESCO's Deputy Director General is coming to Sierra Leone for next week to launch the Civic strategy with us, because they're so proud of the thinking that we have embedded in this work and saying, yes, we want to partner with Sierra Leone. Because everybody talks about mindset. I went to Korea recently, and Korea is a phenomenal country. Like, it blows your mind how advanced they are. I mean, America goes there to buy patents and get their stuff. And you talk to the Koreans, my good friend and former boss, Ban Ki-moon, says, I always tell people the biggest and most significant thing we did in Korea after the war. He tells a story. He was a refugee himself, and they had all these wars and all. He said the biggest thing we did is we invested in what he called mindset shift. He said we didn't try to change, to build roads or build cars. We wanted to change the idea of who a Korean is, what a Korean is capable of.
Successive governments have tried this and it hasn't worked. From the ABC, attitudinal behavioral change, and How is this going to work?
I think those were political campaigns. I think at the end of the day, what you need to do is your point. You ask that point. You think about it from the curriculum. You be bold. Look, other countries looked at their names. Why are we called Sierra Leone again?
What is it? Why are we called Sierra Leone?
It doesn't make any sense. Your name gives meaning. We have a name that means nothing to us. Most Sierra Leoneans will never see a lion in their entire life.
Don't tell me you would be advocating to change the name.
I am advocating to have a conversation about everything. That's what
like we did with the pregnant girls going back to school. Everything should be on the table. Everything should be on the table.
Look,
this is a long discussion.
Everything that we've had so far has not worked for us.
It hasn't worked, and that's the thing. So, it's you do the same thing over again. You get in a result you don't like.
Swaziland became Eswatini.
Eswatini.
Countries can reclaim. Why do we have lions as our national symbol? The lion is actually a pretty lazy animal. It lives only until the age of 16.
This is not the king of the jungle.
King of the jungle, it's nonsense. The lion is a lazy. As soon as the lion is full, they lie down there. They don't live long, and we don't have them. We have the cotton tree. It's a symbol of pride. We have better symbols that we should embrace. We should tell and signal a different story to our children about who we are. But we have even created, you know why the glorifying lion is also problematic? Because it's part of a scheme of glorifying everything we don't have. It's teaching us that we should love the things that are foreign. Nothing that's here.
Okay, that's the activist minister just been unleashed, just been unleashed on the JAB podcast.
Yes.
But I want you to round up. I want you to round up. There's some closing thoughts that you want to send. And I leave that to you. I leave that to you. What would be your biggest dream in this office, and biggest dream for Sierra Leone and for the girls that you've been fighting for the disempowered? That you've been fighting for. Close this podcast with a message to Sierra Leoneans and even general.
Yeah. So personally, I think what I take from the mission that I have. I think you asked me about my personal mission and my personal drive. I've always thought that I have a duty to push the boundaries and to push and make things better. To imagine things that are not, and say why not.
Why not?
And so I think in my role, I want to continue to create and push that imagination. It's like even the Civic Festival that we're doing. It's an imagination. I'm like, no, government has to showcase what we've done to citizens. And how are we going to do that? Let's imagine something different. And let's try to do something big. And so I think what I invite Sierra Leoneans to do is to imagine. And the point of imagination is not that you will achieve every one of them, but that you are free to even contemplate it. That's the beginning of all.
That's the beginning of change. Contemplate. Begin to even that this could be possible.
You have to allow yourself, give yourself the permission to dare. Be audacious, as Obama will say, and dream. And for me to be humble in your audacity. I don't think I will be the person that leads to changing our national symbol or name or whatever. But I want to start.
You want to trigger the conversation.
I want to start the conversation. It's the thing with pregnant girls. When we started it, we did it for 5 years.
It took that long.
Yeah. Some people thought, pregnant girls will never go to school in Sierra Leone. I said, watch us. We are going to stay on this topic because we know we're right. We
should pick on stuff. So I'd say this is a discussion I'm super interested in, and I'd like to see how we drive it. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, we would have a second lap of this, but it's been a very pleasant moment that I've had. What have you heard? What have you learned? One big topic that came over and over again. Born in Kanike, grew up in Old Wharf. It's one of the most deprived communities in the country. There's never any dignity that is called behind Kanike and behind Old Wharf. Look at what he is now. He started with, at a very young age, believing poverty is a mentality, it's a way of thinking, and you could. He never saw himself small, he never saw himself poor, and he created the future first in his mind of what he'd like to become. And once he had that imagination, the next step was to live it. Would you do it today? Well, you agree, disagree with what we have shared, leave your comments below. And our contacts are on the screen, 030-600-200. Want to hear your comments, 030-600-200, 030-600-800. Follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, and all our social media channels. On behalf of our sponsors, AfriCell, AfriMoney, RC Bank, it's been a great pleasure having you today, Mr. Minister. And thank you. Thank you for the privilege of
Thank you for what you do, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design. This is the JB Show, and it's your life by design.